ground speed. In the air, you're going to feel airspeed. On the ground, you feel the wind speed. So here on the ground, I've got 20 kilometers an hour of wind. When I'm flying, I'm moving through that air. And my movement through the air gives me my airspeed.
Okay, so you know how this trick works. I'm pointing straight into wind now because I'm looking straight down the windsock. But what's happening down there? You see the windsock? Which way is the wind blowing? So the wind's blowing this way for me here. Hang on a minute. What's going on there? Maybe if I slow down it'll help. Nope, still pointing into wind. That's odd. Let's do a turn. And look at the windsock down there. The wind's from there. No, it's from here. No, it's from there.
Your wing is always flying at trim speed if your hands are up. I've got about 40 kilometers an hour. It varies depending on how my glider is surging through this thermal. You can see it's going up to 50 and down to about 30. It's averaging around about 40. That way isn't any faster than this way through the air. It also means that if you're coming to set up to land, you don't get any lift because you're pointing into wind. You don't get any less lift if you're landing downwind. You have exactly the same flare out characteristics if you're going downwind or upwind or crosswind. What changes when you go this way is just your ground speed. That's why you land into wind, is just to reduce that ground speed. This airspeed is constant. If I want to slow this down, if I pull the brakes, I get a little bit less flutter. If I go into speed bar and I accelerate, I get more. That's not the wind, that is the airspeed. So the airspeed you control. You're in command of that by what you do to the glider. How do you tell which way the wind's blowing? Can I feel it on my glider? No. If you turn a full circle, you can see when are you moving the slowest over the ground. When is your shadow moving the slowest? That's when you're pointing into wind. When your shadow is moving the fastest, you're going directly downwind. Start building up a sense of that movement over the ground as you're getting higher and as you're looking around. You'll be able to build this up over time so that you don't need a Vario or GPS or anything to tell you what the wind direction is.
You will feel a wind in your face because you're moving through the air. The real wind is blowing from the side over there. Now, to be able to be going along this ridge, I can't fly straight along it because that wind will push me over. So you can see I'm sitting at a slight angle. And that angle changes depending on how strong the wind is. If the wind's really strong, I'm going to have to sit pointing out to sea much more.
So just by gliding in a straight line, I can immediately see which way the wind's coming from. If I'm shifted this way, I'm pointing like that, but I'm going that way, I know the wind's coming from my right. If I'm going like that, the wind's coming from my left. And straight away you can turn and you can see, have I got any drift left? No, I'm still shifting slightly to the left. Turn a little bit more, turn back, and you'll find your point where you're pointing that direction and you're flying that direction.
It's really important to get this concept hard-baked into your head, because I keep on getting questions throughout pilot's progression where pilots are saying, well, I was flying into wind and then I turned to the side And that's why I got to collapse, because the wind came from the side. Now you tell me, can this wind come from the side? There's only one way I can make it come from the side. And that's by doing this. Okay. If I turn crosswind, you can't see it on the streamer, which means you can't feel it on the wing, which means the only way you can tell is by looking overboard and seeing which way you're shifting. So if I'm looking at the distant horizon, I can line up the peaks and I can see I'm being shifted across, which means the wind's obviously from the right. So if I turn out to the right, I pick some other objects to look at, and I try and keep turning until I get to a point where the distant horizon and the foreground aren't moving relative to each other. That means I'm going directly into wind. My second clue, my ground speed will be the slowest possible. Now something's happening, I've got a bit higher. Now I'm doing exactly the same pass as I was doing before. What's happened? Well, the wind must have got stronger. If you look at the windsock down there, it's a little stiffer, and that's giving me more lift. So immediately I know the wind's increasing. So if I'm looking down here, and I can see that I'm not moving very fast, if I look at my GPS, I can see I've got 10 kilometers an hour. Well, that means that I'm flying. You know, I had the little thing up, I'm flying at 40, but I'm only moving at 10. So that means that the whole air mass is moving that way at 30 kilometers an hour. Once you've been flying for a little bit, you also start building up a feeling for how fast you're going over the ground and what's normal. I can tell I'm going slightly downwind. I'm used to my speed, and that's a little bit more than my trim speed. So I know the wind's coming in from behind me, and that's very useful when you're coming into land and you're trying to work out which way the wind is. It's just that appreciation of your speed over the ground. If it looks scary fast on the ground, you're going downwind. If it looks comfy cozy, you can put your feet down, you're pointing into wind. So now, comparing that shadow speed, I'm now pointing into wind. And that's a more acceptable landing speed for me, that I'd be happy running the speed off. So I've got 20 kilometers an hour over the ground now. What's the wind? You know, I fly at about 40. So yeah, we've got 20 kilometers an hour on the nose. Your ground speed is just going to change. You won't feel it. You can't feel the difference when you swing around and turn into wind. So try and remember that those two things are separate. Your airspeed and the wind on the ground. And when you combine the two with the vector, you get the resultant vector, which is your speed over the ground. Ground speed 55, ground speed 39, ground speed 10, ground speed 39 again. You get the picture. So if your ground speed's 39, 40, you know you're going crosswind. If it's lower than that, you're going into wind. If it's higher than that, you're going downwind. It's important to remember that when you're doing 360s close to the ground. As you turn towards the hill, your glide is going to fly just the same as normal. It doesn't care. It'll take just as long to do a 360 turn. If you turn a quarter turn every 4 seconds, the quarter turn will take 4 seconds on the downwind leg just as much as it will on the upwind leg. You don't turn faster and slower. You're just doing this continual circle. But that circle gets drifted with the wind because you are shifted by the
moving air. So when you do a circle close to the ground and you've got the terrain coming up, it will seem like you're flying faster towards the hill. You're moving over the ground faster, but your airspeed is still constant. So it's important to remember to not put in more and more brake to try and get a tighter turn. You have to let the turn take its natural course. But because the wind is going to shift you, you must make sure that you do your turn with enough space upwind of this obstacle. Your turns are going to become loops. But if I suddenly do a downwind turn towards the hill, nothing happens to my airspeed. That stays constant. All that happens is my ground speed increases. So you've got to be careful of making a big loop and smacking into the hill.
Just look at that. My wind and the real wind. It's only now that these two windsocks are going to match, when I'm stationary on the ground. Otherwise, this windsock, the white one, is totally independent to the red one.
All right, I hope that helps clarify wind speed, airspeed, and ground speed for you. Make sure you understand this concept. It's fundamental to your flying safety. And I hope you've always got positive ground speed that gives you the freedom and the options to be able to fly to where you want to. Keep it safe. Cheers.